up, beautiful ladies and handsome men? I am not sure what's true or false in this story. I take gossip, tea, rumor, and scandal from yesteryear, from online, from word of mouth, from books, and I ball it up and I tell you guys a story. Now, let's get to it. Oh, and Glorilla ain't gonna be nowhere in this doggone story, y'all. I just had to put a picture up there because don't they look alike? All right, let's get to it.
What's up and what it do, Scandalites and SaySo Squad? This is Ashley with Ashley Says So. I am back with another Old Hollywood Scandals video, and today we are going to be talking about the queen of Latin soul, Miss La Lupe. Let's get to it. Lupe Victoria Yoli Raymond was born in the barrio of San Pedrito in Santiago de Cuba. Lupe's father was a worker at the local Bacardi distillery, and I'm not exactly sure what her birth mother did. I do know that gossip claims that Lupe had a stepmother, and allegedly this stepmother hated Lupe. Gossip claims it was because Lupe was darker skinned, and she really wasn't darker skinned, she really was like brown skinned, but whatever color she was, that was too dark for her stepmother. So there may or may not been some abuse in the home from her stepmother. Even if it was, Lupe was determined not to let that stop her. Now, while she was still young, Lupe listened to the radio constantly. Mainly, she was waiting to hear one of her favorite singers, Olga Julo. And it was one day in 1954 that a radio station actually announced a talent competition. Lupe ended up skipping school, walking all the way to another city just to compete in this talent show. Lupe goes in, wins the whole competition, and so Lupe started to sing wherever she could, wherever anybody would have her. And it was around this time that she and her family actually moved to the town of Havana. And around this time, she really modeled herself after Olga Julo, but she also modeled herself after famous singer Celia Cruz as well. And just to let you know, both of these women, Olga and Celia, were very straight-laced singers, like very classy, prissy, and straightforward type singers. And when you think of La Lupe, the superstar, you definitely do not think of this style of singing, but at this point in time in La Lupe's life, this style of singing worked for her. In fact, she ended up booking a job with a trio named Los Tropicuba. Now, one part of this trio was a man named Eulogio Yo-Yo Reyes. And gossip claims that this guy was as cool as the other side of the pillow, baby. Yo-Yo allegedly sang with this smooth, silky voice, and then when he got on stage, he would crack all of these kind of jokes. He really seemed to be the Cuban equivalent of Sammy Davis Jr. And of course, women went crazy over this. They would absolutely throw themselves at him. And La Lupe was no different. Now, luckily for her, Yo-Yo actually liked her and found her more attractive than the other women. So Lupe was the one he chose to have on his arm, and she was the one that he chose to marry. But unfortunately for Lupe, once Yo-Yo had her, he kind of felt like he had her. You know, it was almost like he conquered her. You know what I'm saying? There was no more flirtatious behavior, no more dates, no more I love yous. You know, it was basically like, okay, I got you in my back pocket. Now it's time for me to try to see what other women I can be with. And so Yo-Yo quickly turned his attention on capturing those other women. Now, Lupe was a woman that was full of passion and full of emotion, and so Yo-Yo's affairs hurt her terribly. But when she would step to Yo-Yo and ask him about that hoe over there, Yo-Yo would turn around to Lupe and say, you know, you ain't got no business questioning me. You know what I'm saying? I'm a grown man. And if Lupe continued, then he would just straight bust upside the head. But because La Lupe was full of all of this emotion and passion, you know, that wouldn't stop her. She still would feel like she would need to have her say. And so the relationship became very volatile. And it ended up being like a lot of these stories where Yo-Yo was just beating on his wife. Gossip claims that he beat her so bad that Lupe ended up suffering 2 miscarriages. But no matter what, Lupe would not leave Yo-Yo for anything. And a lot of her friends especially kind of thought Lupe was crazy. You know what I'm saying? They did not understand what was so magnificent about this man. Like, really, to be honest with you, I ain't even gonna lie. They felt like, why are you letting this dark-skinned man put you through all that? You know what I'm saying? If you're gonna go through that, you need to be with a doggone high yellow man. What you doing with this blackie poop? Now, although the trio Los Tropicuba, which was made up of Yo-Yo, Lupe, and another young lady, although they were successful in their shows and very successful in creating a name for themselves, things still ended up falling apart. And that is because Yo-Yo heard tell about another female singer that was really good, and he felt the need to go see this singer. As soon as he saw this young lady, Yo-Yo begged and pleaded with Lupe as well as the other girl that were already in his group, telling them, we have to have this girl in our group. If we get her in here, we're gonna shoot to the stars. And so Lupe believed her husband. He may have been a cheater, but he had never steered her wrong in a business sense. So she invited this lady in with open arms, and within 2 days, Lupe behind was out the group. Not only did this new girl replace Lupe in the group, she also replaced Lupe in Yo-Yo's bedroom. So within an instant, not only had Lupe lost her band that she loved so much, she also had lost her husband that she loved so much. And she was absolutely devastated. But instead of just balling up, giving up, and dying, Lupe found some kind of renewed strength, and she walked straight up to her doggone husband and she told him in his face, F you and that bald-headed trio that you love so much. You are going to regret doing this to me. Once Lupe set out on her own, she was determined to make something of herself and make it to the top. And it looked like things were coming together for her very quickly. In the year of 1960, she was actually invited to record her first album. This was great news for Lupe, but her behind was definitely about to hit a red light. She actually ran into her idol, Olga. So while Lupe was sitting up there like, oh my gosh, yes, Olga, I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy to meet you. I'm about to record my first song. Olga was looking at her like, when you get in that doggone recording studio, I expect you to sing songs in your own way. Because remember, I told you she had started singing, modeling herself after Olga as well as Celia Cruz. Well, now Olga is telling her, hey, I'm glad you're finna record, but hey, ma'am, you need to find your own voice. Thankfully, Lupe took the advice and she did end up searching for herself. And when she found herself, what emerged was a woman that nobody was ready for. Lupe revealed herself to be a wild woman. When she performed live, people thought they had been hit by a freight train. This woman would come on stage and scream at the top of her lungs, rip off her headdress and throw it out to the audience. She was almost like a wild screaming banshee, but she became a show favorite, especially with the foreign people, Marlon Brando, Ernest Hemingway, Tennessee Williams, and many, many more. As Lupe's popularity grew, her performances became increasingly more wild. Now she would be gyrating all on stage, pulling at her hair, pulling at her clothes. She would start biting her arms and clawing at her face and, wiping her mouth all fast. And sometimes she would be doing this for show, but sometimes she wasn't. Rumor has it that at one point she ended up dating a guy named Pedro. Lupe was getting ready to walk on stage for her show, and I suppose she saw Pedro talking to another woman. Lupe walks over there in front of the full audience and slaps the mess out of Pedro. Pedro doesn't miss a beat. He turns around, puts his hand to the doggone sky, and slaps fire from Lupe. Lupe turns right back around, slaps Pedro 2 more times, and then runs on stage talking some biting at herself and stuff like that. But she made sure to run all the way to the other side of the stage so Pedro couldn't reach up there and grab her behind back off stage. Then she starts running to the back of the stage to the wall, throwing herself up against the wall. Then there was this other show where she got so worked up, she ripped her wig off her head and twirled it around like this, and she started screaming and growling and moaning. She pulled off her shoe, but instead of throwing it to the audience like she usually did, she started hitting the pianist in the back of the head. The pianist that's on stage with her playing the music. Lupe started busting him in the back of the head with her shoe, honey. Talking about, play it harder, play it harder. Baby, that pianist started playing so doggone fast, his fingers started cramping up. And his head was hurt. They simply did not know what to make of Lupe. Her popularity was growing so enormous. Allegedly, Fidel Castro was jealous of her popularity. And he also did not like the way she was busting people upside the head with shoes. So he basically had her exiled out of Cuba. Lupe at first relocated to Mexico, and then she ended up meeting a guy named Willie Garcia. Willie was very mild-mannered in comparison to Lupe, who was very wild and strong-willed, you know what I'm saying? And Lupe also kind of took care of Willie. So people really judged them because it really looked like Lupe was the man in the relationship. relationship. Within the next 5 years, she went up to New York. And this is when Lupe got to the top of her game. She was signed to Morris Levy's record label, and when she was signed with this record label, Morris Levy thought it would be wise to pair her with a guy named Tito Puentes, and Tito Puentes actually had a big band.
Okay, y'all, this next clip got deleted by mistake, so I got to do it as a voiceover. But anyways, when Lupe and Tito and his band got together, baby, they took America by storm. They were an instant hit. That gal came over here shaking and pulling off her wig and jewelry and all this kind of stuff. And so people were just amazed, and they started paying top dollar just to see these sensational shows. And Lupe was right on the tip of becoming an international worldwide superstar. But see, this where the problem came in. Because notice I said Lupe was on the tip of becoming a worldwide superstar. What about Tito and his band? And baby, Tito didn't like that. Because see, him and his band were basically looked at as a backup band to Lupe. She looked like the star on stage doing all that crazy stuff, and they just kind of looked like her band. People even started to declare her the queen of Latin soul in the early to mid 1970s. Ain't nobody give Tito no kind of title, baby. And then to make matters worse, gossip claims that Lupe's wig head tail was stoking the flames of jealousy as well, because the folks say that she also started treating Tito and his band like they were her backup band. Baby, the folks say if them folks missed a note while she was singing, baby said she'll turn around and cuss them folks out and everything. And so again, this didn't sit well with Tito because, ma'am, we're touring with you. We're not your band. Now this is where it gets messy, because gossip claims that because Tito was so jealous, he started conspiring to ruin Lupe's career. Now this is just Lupe's side of the story. Tito's side of the story may be different, but per Lupe's side, Tito basically started to try to put a bug in Morris Levy's ear. Started saying that Lupe's actions on stage were really kind of ghetto and lowbrow. She was just a little bit too wild to represent the Latin community. But baby, Tito hit a brick wall because Morris Levy ain't cared about nothing that he was saying. Morris loved Lupe. He was a huge cheerleader for her and had her back in every situation. So Tito was definitely barking up the wrong tree. And once Lupe saw that Morris did have her back, she basically took that as reinforcement and started acting out even more. But baby, that was the wrong move there, honey, because no matter how much Morris Levy so-called loved her, he loved money even more. So when somebody came through offering the right price for his record label, he signed his name on the dotted line. And as soon as he did, her haters moved in for the doggone kill, baby. Child, they got all up in them new owners' ears, basically telling them the same thing they told Morris about the Latin community being embarrassed by all of Lupe's antics. And it was downhill from there, because see, these new owners agreed with Tito. And not only were they uncomfortable with La Lupe's stage presence, they were also uncomfortable with her religion, because Lupe was a heavy practitioner of Santeria. And honey, the folks claimed that she was delving into spiritual territory that she didn't know too much about. And there were even rumors that she was using some sort of deities or orishas or spirits or something, honey, to even perform her shows. Now, baby, listen at this.
Now, rumor has it that La Lupe had one show where she started moving unnaturally. She was always all over the place and shaking and all that kind of stuff. But whatever the case, on this particular show, gossip claims that it was something about her movements that were unnatural. Also alleged that her eyes ended up rolling back in her head and she started to scream in a voice that possibly wasn't human. Whatever the case, when she came back to herself and ended her show, it said that when she walked backstage, she was deathly cold, like ice cold. She was said to be so out of breath that she really couldn't even hold herself up, like she was close to fainting, and somebody had to bring in oxygen just so she can get back completely to herself.
Now, allegedly, this episode had everybody at the record label concerned, and they got even more upset. Because instead of Lupe not ever doing that again, gossip claims that she requested an oxygen tank stay backstage for her whenever she performed, because she wanted to continue to invoke whatever presence this was. This is all rumor. I don't know if she really invoked some sort of spirit or not, but once again, a lot of people seem to believe that she did. But from what I could see, it seems like they were willing to let that slide. But the folks say Lupe went to another level, and this right here really made them drop her behind, because gossip claims that she started missing shows, and she started saying that, she was missing the shows because in Santeria, the date was unlucky. Well, child, folks in the music industry, these record labels, they don't play about their money, honey. Now, that's something they won't deal with. So next thing you know, La Lupe started to notice she started to get booked less and less. And she really didn't think too much about it until she realized that the record label was still booking shows, just not for her. Come to find out, they had brought Celia Cruz onto the label. But okay, those were just her solo shows, so it wasn't that bad. But then she started to notice that all of the booked shows that she had with Tito and his band also disappeared off of her schedule. And that's when she found out Celia Cruz had also taken her spot there. In fact, Celia Cruz was the new talk of the town, the new star on Main Street. The folks say when Lupe tried to check in and be like, what is going on, that is when she was told Celia was much more classier than she was, much more ladylike. Celia followed the rules. And just like that, Miss La Lupe, one of the biggest stars on the rise, was frozen out. Her depression hit her very hard. And on the few shows she did still book, gossip claims that Lupe made it worse by going on stage and venting her frustration. The folks say there were plenty of times when she would go up there and be like, y'all know Tito Puente? Y'all know that little man? He fired me. How dare he? I'm La Lupe. And this may have made her feel good, but it didn't look good in the music industry. And then it became even worse for her when Tito found out. So in order to get back at her, he would have a man dressed in drag looking just like Lupe come to the stage and sing her song. La Lupe had officially gone from being the queen of Latin soul to a joke in some people's eyes. Now, there were a few record labels and managers that basically told her they could save her and rescue her, but the only thing they did is put her in bad contracts and take her money. Soon the writing was on the wall. La Lupe was finished in America.
It was around the late 1970s and La Lupe was just running out of steam. Once she saw that her star had fallen horribly in America, she went over to Puerto Rico to try to make a living there. But the people just did not take to her well. In fact, some people started accusing her of being on drugs. These drugs were said to be cocaine and marijuana, and gossip claims that she also sometimes did pills in order to perform. She took uppers and downers. If she did do drugs, then this was terrible because La Lupe really was running out of money, and a lot of that money was said to go to her husband Willie. I'm guessing he got tired of being like this yes ma'am, yes boss, or whatever he was. I'm guessing he got tired of being like a yes man to her, and so he kind of resented that she talked to him the way she did. And so they would start to have these horrible arguments. And there's one rumor when they were in the back of a limousine. So they're arguing back and forth. And then as soon as the limousine stops, Willie jumps out of the car and he slams the door on La Lupe's fingers. And after this episode, their arguments just became progressively worse. His behavior was said to have gotten so bad that La Lupe was like, okay, something is really wrong. Like, we've been together for some years now. So how out of the blue are you just turning into this guy that wants to jump on me, finding problems with everything? Something is wrong. And so allegedly she took her husband to see a doctor, and it was found out that Willie was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So La Lupe came out of a lot of money trying to treat her husband, trying to help her husband. And this was money that the lady just flat out did not have. Yes, she had made a lot of money when she was on top of the world. Yes, she had. But she had spent money. And then on top of that, she had made a lot of donations to Santeria, her religion. After a while, she and Willie split. It was now the early 1980s. She had moved back to New York, and La Lupe had watched herself drop down to one of the biggest Latin stars in the world, to now going to the welfare office to get on welfare. She was also said to be living in a very tiny apartment. And so all of this poverty and despair hit La Lupe hard. It became too much, so La Lupe ended up suffering a nervous breakdown. The folks say that when the breakdown happens, she ends up losing the tiny apartment that she had, and she and her daughter ended up on the street. Word starts to spread around the streets about how terrible life is now for La Lupe, and in the year of 1985, some of her old fans and friends and stuff got together and gave her a benefit program. La Lupe appreciated this help. Also, this was around the time when housing projects were around and booming, so she and her daughter no longer had to live on the street or in a shelter. She was able to get an apartment in a housing project. And this is where rumor says things start to look up for La Lupe a little bit. She looks around at her environment and she's like, you know, I am grateful to have this small apartment. It may be in the projects, but whatever, we can make the best of it. She starts to decorate her little apartment. She really wanted to fix up her little home, so she and her daughter, who I think was the only one living with her at this time, I think her son had kind of grew up, but anyways, she wanted to make it so she and her daughter could have some type of enjoyment. But the vice grip of tragedy just would not let La Lupe go. While she was on this mission of decorating her home, she climbed up to hang some curtains, and she ended up slipping and breaking her back. And from this point on, for a while, La Lupe was said to be wheelchair bound. Then allegedly after this, there was even more pain to add to her life, because her project apartment ended up catching on fire, and a lot of what she owned went up in flames. Now, I couldn't find her living situation after this. It really became spotty, but I'm really thinking she just kind of moved to another project apartment. I'm not sure though. But I do know for sure one thing that she did next. La Lupe ended up making friends with some people, and these people invited her to an evangelical church. At the end of the service, when they were doing prayer and altar call, La Lupe was said to go up to the altar, and the pastor told her that he was about to touch her with healing hands. The old Hollywood streets claimed that immediately she started to feel a transformation going all through her body. The lady was said to be hit with a power so doggone strong that she couldn't talk. But guess what, y'all? She could doggone walk. It was a miracle. Absolute miracle. La Lupe was said to rise up from her wheelchair and walk around enjoying the restoration of her body. After a few minutes, she was able to even talk again, and the first thing she yelled out was, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus, I will follow you from now on." It was the mid to late 1980s, and La Lupe had found a new calling. Instead of going around and touring and singing her worldly songs, she was now going around touring and singing and witnessing about how Jesus saved. And there are plenty of articles telling how she showed up at different churches and she renounced her religion of Santeria. She was now a newborn Christian, and she wanted the world to know. She told her testimony everywhere. As the 1990s came in full effect, La Lupe was said to be very happy with her life. But sometimes she would lament on how the world just kind of dismissed her, how the world just kind of forgot about her. Back in her day and age, she was absolutely known as one of the Janis Joplins and one of the Tina Turners. As a matter of fact, they were the three male identified singers. They sang with power in their voices. They were rough and gruff. So why are those two remembered? But La Lupe is not. But she really did not let that get the best of her. She was just happy that she had found the correct faith for her, and she loved herself, she loved her children, and she lived that way all the way up until the year of 1992, when she ended up dying of a heart attack at the age of 55. And La Lupe was buried in St. Raymond's Cemetery in the Bronx. All right, guys, this is the end of the old Hollywood scandalous tale of Miss La Lupe. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Go ahead and click the subscribe button if you are new here. And guys, once you click that button, go and click the bell and set it for all so you can get all notifications of everything that I do. All right, guys, I gotta go. I gotta work on the next video. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.